Hey guys, and welcome back to yet another video. In this video I got this customer's Td5 Defender and he wants me to change his clutch for him. So this is a really nice Td5 and it has a lot of nice upgrades and stuff, and now the owner has bought a full LOF clutches kit for it. So it has a upgraded clutch, a single mass flywheel, and he also wanted me to change some other things. So I'll just talk you through step by step what to do, and that way you can do this yourself as well. So first of all, you have to remove the fan, the radiator fan, and you do that by removing these releasing these 4 screws that hold the fan shroud on, and then I have some special tools to remove the fan itself. And you have to remove this fan because when you loosen the gearbox of the engine might tip forward, and if the fan is still on, it can actually damage the radiator. So next up, the owner had already removed some stuff on the interior, so I only had to remove the gearbox knobs. And then it was time to put it over my service pit. Now this takes a while because the service pit isn't in the middle of the opening, which is really weird. But anyways, I placed it where I wanted it, and then put the ramps on the side of the wheels, moved the car forward, and then I knew where the ramps were supposed to be and just put it on. Okay, so I did this job by removing the gearbox from the car itself, and that way you don't have any handbrake or any gears to put it in. So that's why I strapped down all 4 wheels to the ramps to stop the car from rolling off. Okay, so first step, we remove the exhaust. I started with the center part. On some cars you still have the center silencer. This one has straight pipe already. Now the center part is just removed really easy. 2 bolts on each side, or 3 on the one side. And then it's time to remove the rear prop shaft. And I removed the rear prop shaft from the car completely. You can probably hang it down, but I wanted to have some more workspace. And then I removed the hand drum brake. There's a little screw holding the drum in place, so just remove that. And then you can pull the brake drum off. And it's not always that easy, as you can see. Okay, then you have to remove the brake shoes, and they are held on with 2 springs and then 2 clips. And these are really a pain to remove and even worse to put back on. So the left one first, that's the easiest one, and then the right one is connected to the handbrake cable as well. So when you remove that, it's still held on to the cable. Now I use some pliers to get the cable off the handbrake itself, of the brake shoe. It's never fun to work on handbrakes or brake drums in general, so yeah, good luck with that. And then you push the handbrake cable out through the front of the handbrake assembly, basically. Okay, next up I remove the front prop shaft as well. I removed it from the axle and the transfer case because I was going to lift the transfer case out, and it gives a lot more space. Then there's a little cross member, and it's bolted on with 4 bolts on each side. So you can see there 1 and 2 on the bottom, and then 2 on the top of the frame rails. So remove those. And it also held the downpipe mount in place. And then use some force to remove it. Some cars it might be stuck worse than this. So just use a lot of violence and you'll get it out. And don't drop it on your feet. Okay, next up we'll remove the starter motor. You have to remove all the wires from it, so make sure to unplug your battery first, both terminals, so that you don't have any power on there. And remove the wires from it, and then there are 2 bolts holding the starter motor in place. And then you can just lift it out. Okay, then it's time for the slave cylinder. I just removed it with the 2 bolts holding it in place. I put it to the side onto the frame rails, and then it was out of the way. Okay, there are some breathers at the back of the engine. Just make sure to unclip those, because they will come out of the car with the gearboxes. Okay, then you start unplugging all the wires from the gearboxes and also the grounds. Now just go around. You can see that there are quite a lot of plugs, and this can vary from car to car. And this vehicle also had a rover drive, so it had an overdrive bolted to the rear of the transfer case, so it was extra heavy. Now this is how I put my engine hoist into the car and strapped it to both of the gearboxes. And you have to do that before you remove the mounts. So make sure that your gearboxes are supported before you remove the mounts. And there's only 1 mount on each side. That one was hard to remove, the other one came out easy, but I just lifted up the gearboxes a bit better to remove that other mount. Now it's time to separate the gearbox from the engine itself. There are a few bolts holding it onto the engine, so just go around and loosen those. They are different lengths, so make sure to remember where they go. And there are also 2 bolts on the top of the engine, so they are behind all these coolant and vacuum pipes and stuff. Okay, I decided to remove the transfer case on itself because I couldn't get the main gearbox out. I missed 1 small bolt, and that made my whole job a lot worse. So when separating the transfer case from the main gearbox, you have to remove 4 bolts and 2 nuts, and also you have to drain it of oil because the one of the bolts goes through one of the oil passages basically. So when you remove that bolt, all the oil will run out. So it's best to just drain the transfer case before you remove it.
Nice, den kommer.
You can see I separated them. I had a little helmet on just in case it would hit me in the head or something, because it's quite tight space working in the service pit. Okay, and just be patient. I had a buddy work the engine hoist for me. That way it was a lot easier to have good control. Okay, so that's the transfer case out. I just put it on the ground and moved it out of the way. Okay, and next up was the main gearbox. Now it's a big unit and it's heavy, so just be patient. And because I had my straps on the rear of it, it wanted to lean forward, but that was no big issue. I just set it down and moved it out of the way as well. Okay, so here you can see the old clutch assembly. You just have to remove the 6 nuts holding it onto the flywheel. And that's the pressure plate. So just remove it and make sure to catch the clutch disc as well, because it's loose in there. There you have it. And then it's time to remove the flywheel. It's held on with 8 bolts. And it's a very heavy unit, so just make sure to not drop it on your feet or anything. Okay, then I replaced the rear main seal. And for this you actually have to drop the sump as well, because the oil sump gasket actually has some pins that go into the rear main seal. So I did not know this before I started, but I found out very quickly that this was the case. So I drained the engine oil, then I removed most of the sump bolts. I just left the front ones in and released them slightly to be able to drop the sump the distance I needed. Okay, that's the sump removed. Now reinstalling the rear main seal is quite easy. You have this plastic protective ring and then you press it onto the engine basically. There you go, and it clicks in place. And just make sure that all the holes line up and then tighten it. I think it was 25 Newton meters on each bolt, and then you can tighten the sump back again. And don't forget to fill the engine with oil. And the sump is torqued in a special sequence. Okay, that's the new rear main seal. Now here you can see the old clutch parts. So you have the dual mass flywheel, the clutch disc and the pressure plate. Now this had been on for 250,000 kilometers. Here's the new flywheel. It's a single mass one, and then the clutch plate has the springs to absorb some vibrations. New clutch plate, a new release bearing and fork. So I installed a new spigot bearing as well. Now this is a job that you don't really want to do. It's hard to remove if you don't have the special tool, but I just used a old trick, and I'll link it in the description down below. You just use a bolt and a nut to get it out, and then when reinstalling you use a socket and a piece of flat material and just bang it into there, and then make sure that it sits right below the flange. There you go. Okay, time to install the flywheel. And then put all the 4 bolts in, and you have to torque those in a special sequence as well, in a star pattern basically. You torque them to 40 Newton meters according to the LOF instructions that came with the flywheel. And for this I locked the flywheel in place. LOF clutches supplied a special tool for that. You can buy it off them. Now torque every bolt to 40 Newton meters, and then I marked them all, because then it was time to tighten them 90 degrees, and that was really hard work. So this took some time, but just be patient and try to not hurt yourself. And when you've done 90 on all of them, it should look just like that. You can see all the marks are aligned to each other. Okay, next up you put the clutch plate on and use a special centering tool, and then it's time to install the pressure plate. Now this is bolted to the flywheel and has some locating pins as well, so you cannot install this wrong. Okay, just do the 6 new bolts and then torque them to spec, and make sure that your centering tool always moves in and out freely. That way you know that your clutch plate is exactly centered and that it won't catch on anything. If you can't get it in and out this easy, then you have done something wrong and you have to readjust. Okay, there you go. That's really beautiful and you won't ever see it again. Now just make sure to remove the flywheel locking tool. Okay, next up we put the new clutch fork and bearing in, and then it's time to lift the gearbox back in. And my girlfriend helped with the engine hoist. Okay, just lift it in place and slide it onto the engine. And then it's time to put all the bolts back on. And next up is the transfer case. Now same thing there, just be careful. I lowered the engine a bit to get a perfect angle to slide it onto the gearbox, and then it's time to do all the bolts and nuts back up. Okay, time to fit the gearbox mounts back in place. Now this one was a really tough one to get in there, but yeah, if I can do it, you can do it too. Just be patient. A lot of this took so much longer than it shows in the video. Other side, I used a pry bar to move the gearbox around and get the mounts into place. And a little hammer, of course. I had to reinstall some gearbox linkages to the overdrive and to the low range and stuff, because when you separate the transfer case from the main box, you have to remove some levers and linkages. And then just hook up every electrical connection that you removed. I put the slave cylinder back in, and then I reinstalled the starter motor. And just be sure to connect all the wires back up to where they were. So just make some photos before you remove it, and then when you reinstall it, you can just check the photos to see that all your wires are correct. Okay, downpipe back in. I used a ratchet strap to hold it in place, because that way it is easy to put the nuts back onto the turbo in the engine bay. And after that you put the cross member back in. Now there was a lot of hammering necessary to get it back in place, but just be patient and hit it hard. And then adjust it using another hammer to get the holes to align. And then it's 4 bolts on each side. Put those back in. And don't forget to get the exhaust mount in there as well. Front prop shaft back on. And then it's time for the dreadful handbrake job. Now, if there's anything I don't want to do again, it's removing the handbrake. But you have to remove the handbrake shoes to get the handbrake cable off. That's the only reason why you have to do this. So it's really annoying. Anyways, I probably struggled with that for half an hour, 40 minutes or something to get those small clips back on. And with the handbrake shoes installed, you can put the handbrake drum back on and that one little screw that holds it into place. And then you can make sure to adjust the handbrake if you need to. And then it's time to put the rear prop shaft back on. Just a reminder to fill your engine oil and the transfer case oil as well if you remove the transfer case from the gearbox. And then it's time to put the center section of the exhaust back on. Okay, so the owner wanted me to swap the clutch slave cylinder as well. So I did that for him and I put the Loft Clutches Power Spec slave in. But apparently you're not supposed to put the Loft Clutches slave in if you just installed a new clutch. So I had a lot of hard time bleeding the clutch slave and getting it to work, and it just couldn't get the clutch to disengage from the engine with this slave cylinder. And I had to find out the hard way that it would just not work with a new clutch. So I had to reinstall the old clutch slave cylinder and bleed it a lot to make it work. So that's what you see here. Now if you don't remove the slave, then you should not have to bleed it either when doing this job. So lucky you if you don't have to do that. So I ended up adjusting the master cylinder and the clutch pedal, as you can see here, and then I got it to work properly. So yeah, job done. It's a lot of work, but the result was definitely worth it. So yeah, I hope you like this video. I hope this will help. And if you got any questions, just comment them down below. And if you got any suggestions on what you want to see in the future, just comment those down below as well. And be sure to subscribe. There's a lot more coming. You might have seen the Volkswagen bus next to the Defender in the garage. I got some videos coming on that as well. So yeah, just be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.